I have a wonderful privilege to be able to share with you the miraculous story of God's journey and how He has called me and so many other people to be part of His plan for His kingdom purposes. And it all began about 10 years ago. In 2009, we had an embroidery shop at our home, and I was busy working, and I sensed a need to stop for prayer, and I turned everything off, and I started to pray, and I still remember that prayer, and it was a prayer of surrender, something like this: Lord, if there's any talents or gifts that you've given me, and you want to use them for your honor and glory in your kingdom, I surrender them to you. I didn't think much of it at the time, and I thought it was a very innocent prayer. But it's also a very dangerous prayer because you don't know what God's going to call you to. And as the year unfolded, I had a restlessness about me, and God wrestling within me if I was where He wanted me to be. That prayer happened in 2009, but in the winter of 2010, I sensed God wanting me to sell our embroidery business. And I went to my husband and told him that. And he was confused. He's like, why? And I said, well, God's telling me to do it. But what are you going to do? I don't know. Where's God leading you? I don't know. But all I know is I have to be obedient and put this up for sale. And at that time, I don't know if you remember, there was an economic recession in 2008, 9, and 10. And things were not going well. Things were not selling. Businesses were closing. Lots of unemployment. So we decided to be obedient and put it up for sale. 2 weeks later, the business sold in its entirety for full price. Unheard of in that time. But once it sold, God started to reveal to me what His plan was. And I started to take time and started journaling. And the whole story of this new ministry that He wanted to start started to unfold. And I started documenting and journaling that. As I was journaling about this new ministry plan that God had, it was so gracious of God to use the gifts that He created within me. They're my passions. I love sewing. I love quilting. Anything to do with needle, thread, and fabric, I love. And what God did is He took what He created within me, and now He turned it to use for His kingdom purposes. And so as I was journaling His idea of this new ministry, it included sewing and quilting. But we were called to serve those who are grieving somebody they have lost, and they want their legacy to live on. They want their memory to live on. And we are going to do that with this ministry, creating memory quilts, so they can tell the story of their loved one. Their legacy can live on. And God also told me that whatever money is raised from these quilts, it's supposed to be given away, 100% of it. We are not to keep any of it for operations. It will all be given away to help children in need, but I didn't know where that was to be yet. After a couple months, I met with my husband and I said, guess what? I know now what God wants us to do. And I explained to him about this new ministry concept. And he said to me in amazement, and he's like, how did you ever think of that? And I said, I didn't. As I prayed and as I listened, I journaled, and this is what God wants to do. He said, what are you going to call it? I said, I don't have any idea. He hasn't told me that yet. So we kept moving forward, and I kept journaling. And one day I was working in our backyard, and my daughter was getting married. I was just cleaning up the yard, working, weeding, and so on. All of a sudden, a name popped in my head out of the blue, and the name was Living Threads. I stood up from weeding, and I'm like, Lord, that is the name you want. And so I ran in the house, and I went on the computer, and nobody owned that name that I could find. So I immediately contacted someone and bought that domain name of Living Threads Ministry. And I knew that was the name He wanted. So as the summer was going on, I kept preparing for what God was calling me to do, and kept journaling and preparing for this new adventure that He had planned. I was sitting in a presentation that summer, and I had gone to visit. There was a presentation of some women who had gone to Africa. And I knew God had revealed to me in His plan for this new ministry that we were to partner with an organization to provide for needy children somewhere in the world. I had no idea what organization. I had no idea where in the world. But I knew another thing that's very unusual. He wanted us to give 100% of any money we raised to the children. So that's very unusual, because how are we going to operate if we give 100% away? But I knew that was part of his plan. So I went to this presentation, and they were talking about this slum called Kibera in Nairobi, Kenya. And I don't know if anyone else ever has this, but there's something happens within my body when I know God is speaking to me and trying to get my attention. My heart starts pounding super, super hard, and my heart does something different. It starts beating so hard and so loud, like it's going to pop out of my chest. And I was sitting in that presentation, and it started to do that. And I remember sitting there and saying, Lord, are you trying to tell me something? Is this the ministry that you want us to partner with? Is this where you want the funds to go? God had gifted me with the ability to sew and quilt, something I love to do. And he gave me the privilege to be able to use what he created within me in this new ministry. Because we make memory quilts for people who have passed away. That's what the plan is. So from somebody passing away, now he just revealed where he wants the funds to go to help keep children alive. And so I knew we had to partner and had to learn more about the Kibera slum in Kenya. Well, as time went on, I still continued to prepare for this ministry. Nobody knew yet but my husband. And I called 6 friends together that I went to church with, that I respect, and wanted them to speak into it. I asked them to come over, and I revealed this new ministry idea to them. That was in August of 2010. A week later, 2 of those ladies who were there called me up and said, Jill, when do you want to start? We're ready. So on September 8 of 2010, 3 of us, Marge DeYoung, Kathy Kempema, and myself, we started in the garage at my home. It was the old embroidery shop, but it's now been transformed to a ministry center, and it's called Living Threads. So on September 8, we began, and it's so interesting because we had the name of Living Threads, but we did not have a logo or anything else. But my husband and I had gone to Glen Arbor, Michigan. We were sitting on the shore. He was messing around in the water, and I was sitting there. I started drawing in the sand. God gave me the image of the logo for Living Threads. I drew it in the sand, called my husband over. Look here's our logo. And then from there, I put it on paper and took it to a graphic artist. So God not only revealed the plan, the name, the partnership, even down to the logo of the ministry. Now, with the quilting ministry, you need to have a long arm quilter to quilt those quilts together. Every quilt is made of 3 parts, a top, a batting, and a back, and they have to be quilted together. We had no means to do that in our beginning of the ministry, but there was a lady named Bonnie Roby who lived in Middleville, Michigan. She was a friend that has been doing my quilting. I went to her and told her my idea and the need that we had. Now, this lady is a top award-winning quilter. Her waiting list is 4 to 6 months to get a quilt back from her. But after I told her about the ministry, she said, oh, that's wonderful. Maybe God can use my gifts for his services too. I will do your quilts, and I'll do a 2-week turnaround for you. And so she came on board and did those off-site for us. So that was such an answer of prayer, how God has provided. Now, back when in the summer, when I went to hear that presentation of the Kibera slum, it's an organization called International Needs that had put on this trip that I went to hear about. I contacted them, and I wanted to learn more about their organization because I believed that not only was God calling us to partner with another organization, but not just a humanitarian aid organization. Evangelism had to be a priority because we can feed children for a day and we extend their life for a day, but if they don't know Jesus, they're lost for all of eternity. So I knew it was important that whatever organization we partnered with, evangelism had to be a priority. So I contacted International Needs, asked to meet with them. I met with the president, Rody Rodenhaver, in the fall of 2010. Asked him to explain to me about their organization, and one of the things he said to me is a priority is evangelism. That is a priority. But if we don't feed them, they can't hear the Word of God. And so they go hand in hand. So as he explained to me that they have Bible clubs there and any child in the slum can come to hear the Word of God and they get fed, again, my heart was beating and I knew that was a partnership that needed to happen. I told them about Living Threads. They wanted to partner. And that's where it all began, to partner with them. Now, I attended at that time First Reformed Church in Zeeland, and I went to the leadership and told them about this new ministry idea. And they became very excited about it and decided to offer for us to come under their umbrella. So we could come under their 501c3 umbrella. They not only did that, but they financially supported us, they prayerfully supported us, they encouraged, they raised awareness of what we were doing. They were absolutely wonderful. And they looked at it as they're helping to birth something that will eventually grow and go on their own. So that partnership with First Reformed Church, God used them to allow his ministry to continue. Now, when I sold the embroidery shop in 2010, one of the agreements to the new owners was I would have to work for them for 6 months so that we could transfer the customers over, the loyalty, all of that. So I did that while we were starting Living Threads. My last day at work there, I had fulfilled my commitment. I went up to the owner and I said, before I leave, I have a question for you. I said, what made you buy so fine embroidery? And he looked at me and he said, Jill, that is such an easy answer. God told me to. And I was just so amazed. Not only was God calling this new ministry in existence, he was preparing this business owner to help lead the way by telling him he needed to buy an embroidery shop in an economy that was so questionable. And it was just, you knew God's hand was all over that. Since the ministry began in September of 2010, I knew that we needed to have a board of directors. I didn't know anything about running a nonprofit. I knew nothing about how a board runs, but I knew that since God called me, he would equip. And so he pressed upon my heart one of the volunteers who started with us, Marge DeYoung, to ask her to be on the board. And the most interesting thing happened. I don't know why it surprises me, but when I called her, she said, I would love to. I was hoping you would ask. And then God pressed upon my heart another man that I should ask to be on the board. I didn't know him very well, and I thought it was kind of awkward for me to ask him. But I was at church one day, and God placed the two of us alone in a hall. I walked past, and I thought, I'm not going to ask him. I feel kind of awkward. And God pressed upon me, like, I told you to ask. So I turned around, I went back and asked him, and he became on our board, and his name was Dave McCleary. So in January of 2011, we held our very first board meeting, myself, Dave McCleary, and Marge DeYoung. While a few months after we had started, we probably had been maybe 4 or 5 months. Now remember, we were in a garage at our home. We had zero money. So some of the funds that I had received from selling the embroidery shop, I had bought some tables and chairs and some used sewing machines, some things to get us started. But there was so much more we needed. But there was a local company called Fleetwood, and they're very generous, and they give to local organizations. They heard about Living Threads. They sent me a check for $1,500. Now, for an organization that had zero, that was a lot of money. So with that money, that allowed us to buy accounting software, a laptop, and some additional sewing machines. So that was just an amazing, amazing gift. We continued to work on some memory quilts that were given to us by, I had a couple family members and a friend who came to me when they heard Living Threads was started, and they gave us a couple projects to start on. But one day I was in Walgreens, and as I was in Walgreens, there weren't very many customers in there, and I was checking out. It was in the evening, and the cashier started pouring out her heart to me, and she started telling me about her husband drowning when he was fishing. And for 15 minutes I stood there and I listened to her, and she went on to tell me the story. And it hadn't been too long ago that this had happened. And so I just listened and I left. I did not tell her about Living Threads because I wanted to just digest it and give her time. The next week, I went back on the same evening because I figured she was working. That was her night to work. And I looked for her and found her. And I asked her, do you remember talking to me last week about your husband? And she did. So I told her about Living Threads. So she actually was our very first memory quilt client from somebody I didn't know. And that came through a visit at Walgreens. Now, I believe that's a divine appointment that God does. Those don't happen by accident. So now we're getting into about the summer of 2011. We're not a year old yet, but I was at City on a Hill in Zeeland. They have a cafe there, and I was there to do Bible study with some friends of mine. They had all left, and I was sitting there doing some writing and some paperwork. Now, City on a Hill is the old Zeeland Hospital, and they have transformed that into a ministry center. So what they do is allow faith-based nonprofits to rent space at a reduced rate there, and then they have the cafe that serves the public. While I was sitting there, I was sensing God saying to me, you need to check out what it means to come here. And I remember arguing with God and saying, Lord, you don't understand, there's no way, we have zero money. And he kept pressing upon me, but you need to find out what it takes to come here. And I kept thinking, I am not going to do that. I am going to look like a fool. We have nothing. But as God kept pressing that upon me, I made a deal with him. I said, Lord, okay, I will do that if I find the director's office, if the door is open, and if he is in there, I'll do it. Otherwise, I am out of here. And I had never been anywhere in that building past the cafe. So I got up, gathered my things, and started walking down the hall. And it wasn't long, I saw a sign, the director. And I kept walking, found his office, the door was open, and he was sitting there. So I had to follow through with the deal that I made with the Lord, and I knocked on his door and I asked him, I introduced myself and asked him, what is involved with coming to City on a Hill? I don't know much about it. Would you tell me more about it? So he told me about it and gave me a tour. They did have some rooms available, and the first room he took me into, God did his thing again. My heart started beating like it was going to pound out of my chest, and it was so loud, the first room we went into. Like, okay, Jill, wake up, this is your room. And he was getting my attention. We went through several other rooms. Nothing happened. My heart didn't do that. Nothing happened. So I knew that was the room. But the director said to me, so will any of these work for you? And I said to him, probably that first room. But before I do anything further, may I bring some people here to see it, and may we spend some time in prayer here? So the next day, I brought the two ladies who volunteer with me and my husband, and I had them look at the space, and they said, oh, Jill, this is perfect for us. And so I said to them, well, God's going to have to do a real miracle here, because I have no idea how we can move here. We have no money, so we're just going to need to pray. We sat on the floor and we spent time praying. I contacted the director and said, you know, that first room that you showed us would work out really well. What is the next step? And he said to me, I'd have to bring it before my board, and they would have to approve you coming. So I said, well, we have a little problem here. We don't have much money, so I just wanted to know how much is it, and you tell me what is involved. And he said, well, let's not do anything further or talk any further until I see if you can even be approved to come. So that's how it was left. So we left, and we just continued to pray about it. One day, Kathy and I were in the ministry center here in my garage, and at lunch, we took some time to pray. And I still remember that prayer because I prayed, Lord, if you want us to move there, you're going to have to do a miracle. And if there's any way you could give us 4 months of free rent, I think that would be the answer. We could do it. It wasn't 5 minutes later, the phone rang. It was the director of City on a Hill. And he said, Jill, I've got some news for you. Just got out of a board meeting, and our board approved you to come to City on a Hill. And one more thing, we're going to give you 6 months of free rent. I immediately started to cry. He didn't know about the prayer we just prayed 5 minutes before, but I immediately started to cry. And when I got off the phone, I had no idea what I had even said to him. So the next day I called him and I said, I don't know what I said to you yesterday, but yes, we'll come, and thank you so much. So that was July of 2011. They allowed us to start coming and cleaning and painting. Well, we had no money. So I started calling paint stores and saying, do you have any paint that you mix that you don't know what to do with and you're going to give it away? And that's how our colors became our colors. We got free paint. And we just found any tables and chairs, anything we could find in storage rooms at City on a Hill, they gave us access to, anything we could find to try to set up this ministry center. So we did that. And on September 1 of 2011, we had a dedication service, and we read from Psalm 100 and sang the doxology, giving God thanks and glory for providing this space for us. So now it's September 1, and we're in our new ministry center. But before we moved here, Kathy and Marge and I started with an idea called Bible Block of the Month. And so we started brainstorming and coming up with ideas. If we could ever hold a class called Bible Block of the Month, we could get some revenue to help support the ministry, but also have women in the Word and help grow their love for quilting at the same time. So we started formulating that about the same time we were remodeling the room at City on a Hill. So here we are in October of 2011, and we were ready to start a Bible Block of the Month class. We prayed that we would get 12 women who might be interested in coming, but guess what? God gave us 20 women who are willing to come and pay per month to come and learn more about quilting and to be in the Word. Now our Bible Block of the Month class has continued every year since, and we've had 568 women participate in our on-site class since we began. We've also held off-site mail order classes, and we've had 48 people participate in that. So it helped us to reach beyond just the Holland-Zeeland area. Now it's December of 2011. We have been at City on a Hill for 4 months since our opening date of September 1. Now, if you remember, we had said a prayer asking God for 4 months of free rent, but City on a Hill gave us 6 months. I wanted to honor our prayer, so I went to the director of City on a Hill and I handed him a check for rent. And he said, you don't owe any rent yet, you have 2 more months. I said, no, you don't know, but we prayed and asked God for 4 months. You generously gave us 6, but we're going to honor that prayer and we're going to start paying now, so now that you can go and help somebody else that needs it. And so we honored that prayer, and God provided miraculously, because by that time we had enough revenue coming in that we felt we could now pay our own expenses. In June of 2012, I had the privilege of being able to go on a trip to Kenya to visit the Kibera slum and the 5 Bible clubs that were in place at that time. At that time, there were about 300 children attending. And it was an absolute life-changing experience. When you see that kind of poverty, you see that kind of close to starvation, people barely getting by to survive, and they're living one day at a time. And you see the sights, the sounds, the smells that you've never experienced before. It is life-changing. And the passion within me for what we do even grew stronger, and knew we had to do more and more to help. So that trip was just foundational. And the ministry continued to grow. God continued to bless it. He continued to call more people to come around. We had more volunteers. But God did something. There was an organization right across the hall from us, and they were going to be moving out. And I didn't have any office space to meet with people to create these memory quilts and meet with them in privacy. Now, we felt we had enough revenue coming in that we could take that step of faith and take on another room. So we were able to add on some storage space some conference space, and an office. So clients had privacy to share their stories of their loved ones. So what an amazing, amazing gift that God gave us. Now, following that, in November of 2012, we decided to hold our very first benefit dinner. And we held that at City on a Hill. We maxed out the room at 125 people. And it was a time to share what God has already done in our 2 years, and to give people the opportunity to partner with us and support what we were doing, become aware of what we were doing, so they could share to those they know who have lost loved ones, to come and have memory quilts made, and they could come alongside of us. So that was a wonderful blessing, and it was a time of celebration. Since then, we've had our annual benefit dinner every year through 2019, and we've had over 1,800 people attend those benefit dinners. And so we are so very grateful for that. In 2012, our board was starting to grow. I think we had 5 members then. But we didn't have a board chair. I didn't know anything about that. But I was taking a leadership class at City on a Hill, and the instructor was Becky Stahl. We became friends through that. And one day, when I was taking a shower, I was praying for the ministry, and I was asking God about, more board members, a board chair, all of that. And I know, even though it wasn't an audible voice, it was like God said it in my head. He said, ask Becky. And so it was as clear as a bell. And so I invited Becky for dinner, and I told her what God said, and I asked her if she would consider being our board chair. And she had no experience as a board chair. She was blown away, but she prayed about it also. And she sensed God saying, yes, you are the person I want to have. So in 2012, we now had a board chair. Our board was now 6 people, and every one of them was called in their own special way. And we started investigating, what does it mean to form our own nonprofit organization? So we started meeting with lawyers and getting bylaws written and articles of incorporation, and filing for our own 501c3. It was not an easy task, and it was taking a long time. And at that time, there was talk about faith-based nonprofits having to wait a long time to get this 501c3. But after a year and a half, in 2013, we received notification in June that we got our own 501c3. So now we were no longer under First Reformed Church, that they so graciously allowed us to be for so many years, but we now were birthed and we had our own organization, and we were independent, and we were so grateful for that. In our summer board meeting of 2013, we were discussing what would it mean for us to get our own long arm quilting machine. I was still taking all the quilts to Bonnie Roby in Middleville, which meant the quilts would have to leave the facility. I'd have to drive 45 minutes each way and then go back and pick them up and bring them back. So we were discussing that it might be a good idea to look into getting our own machine. But one of our board members, Gary Feenstra, suggested that why don't we at this fall's benefit dinner raise awareness of our need and see what happens. I remember looking at him and saying, Gary, do you have any idea what those machines cost? We're looking at $33,000. And he says, well, if God wants us to have it, he's going to provide it. So we took that step of faith, and we used his words of wisdom, and decided as we prepared for our October 2013 banquet that we would just make the need known. We were not going to take a collection for it. We were not going to take pledges for it. So as I gave my update, I showed a picture of what is a long arm quilting machine. And I had told the audience that that would cost $33,000, and we had $8,000 raised. So we had a shortfall of $25,000. And all I said was, if anybody is interested in helping, just let me know. That was all that was said, and we went on with the evening. When I was talking about that long arm machine, and when I said the word, we are in need of $25,000, my eyes clicked with a guest that was in the audience. our eyes connected. Now, usually when I speak, I don't connect eyes, period. I'm just looking at the whole crowd, but our eyes connected. I have no idea why, and I still remember that. But we went on with the evening and so on. The very next morning, I received an email from the man whose eyes I connected with. And he said this to me. He said, last night at your banquet, you mentioned this long arm quilting machine, and you mentioned that you still have $25,000 to raise. You are not going to believe this, but 2 weeks ago, God told me I had to give $25,000 away, and I had no idea where I was supposed to give it. Until you mentioned last night, you needed $25,000 to get this machine. So I wanted to let you know that go order your machine. I'm going to send you $25,000. And he thanked me for the opportunity to be able to allow him to be obedient to what God had asked him to do 2 weeks previously. So God did a miraculous work there, and he provided long before we even asked. But that wasn't all that he did, because at that time, City on a Hill was totally full. There was no space, and I was getting this huge long arm machine coming. It's 12 feet long, and where was I going to put it? So I had gotten a hold of the director of City on a Hill, and I had told him about this machine that I was ordering and that it would be arriving, and did he have any space that would work. Now, this is an old hospital, remember, and it's hospital rooms, and those aren't very large. And he said to me, Jill, you're not going to believe it. I just had somebody move out, and they had a double room, and the wall has been removed between the rooms. Would you like to see it? Again, God provided, and he showed me that room, and I'm like, it's perfect. It's perfect. The machine will fit in here perfectly. It was on the opposite side of the building as us, but that was okay. There was a room available. So he put a hold on that room for us as we were waiting for the machine to arrive. But you are not going to believe what God did next. I had a lady come to me and say to me, Jill, I heard you're going to be ordering a long arm quilting machine. I said, yeah. She said, do you have a place to put it? And I said, we do. And she said, is that additional rent you're going to have to pay? And I said, yeah. She said, well, how much are they going to charge you? And I told her. She sat down right then and there. She wrote a check, and she handed me this check, and she said, here's 1 year's worth of rent. Get your feet on the ground, learn how to use this machine, and this should give you time to do that. So not only did God give us the $25,000 for the machine, but he gave immeasurably more than we asked for or we could have even imagined by giving us 1 year's worth of rent and having a room become available for that machine. Only God can do that. Now, a year before we even ordered this machine, 2 women came to me independently and separately, and they said this to me, hey Jill, do you think you'll ever get a long arm quilting machine? And I looked at them and I laughed and I said, do you have any idea what those things cost? And they said, well, if you ever do, I've always wanted to learn to operate one. So if you ever do, just keep me in mind. And that was Jean Poost and Lori Boovy. Now, a year later, I had just ordered this machine. So I bet you can imagine, I went and contacted those 2 ladies and said, did you mean what you said? And they both said, yeah. And I said, well, I've got this machine coming. I need somebody to operate it. The machine arrived in January of 2014, and those 2 ladies were there to greet the new machine and begin their training on it. Now the ministry is going well. Everything's continuing to grow. More quilts are being made, more volunteers are coming, more Bible Block of the Month students are coming, and we're doing our own long arm quilting. But as we were growing, we needed more space. We had 1 sewing space, that original room that God provided, and we only had 9 sewing spots. But we had more volunteers and we had more work than we could keep up with. But once again, the tenants right across the hall vacated a room, and it was perfect and right at the right time. And we were able to take that room on and add 6 more sewing stations. So we now have 15 sewing stations. But I wanted to name these rooms, because how do we keep them straight? And you know the story of Mary and Martha. Mary was the one at Jesus' feet, right? and Martha was the worker. And so I realized that at Living Threads, our 2 rooms kind of simulated that story, because we sat on that floor of that first room. We just sat at Jesus' feet and prayed. And so that became our Mary room. The room across the hall became our Martha room, because not only do we do that, but we work too. And we are serving the Lord. So we're doing the Martha part of it also. So our 2 sewing rooms are the Mary and Martha room. In 2015, we had no staff but myself. And so as we were growing, there was no way I could do everything. And in order for our ministry to be sustainable, we needed staff and we needed other people to be involved. And I needed so badly someone to do our bookkeeping and our finances. And God provided a lady named Kathy Bosch. She had been one of our Bible Block students, but now I had the opportunity and the revenue to hire a staff person. And I was able to hire Kathy to do our bookkeeping and accounting. And at the same time, we needed somebody to oversee all the Memory Quilt projects, to oversee all the volunteers, to schedule them, take care of the daily sewing that took place. And I was able to hire a godly woman named Michelle Grable. And she became our operations director. And she is in charge from the beginning of the Memory Quilts, through taking care of all the volunteers, all the supplies, to the quality control before it's picked up, and does an amazing job. And she was hired also in 2015. Each year, we commit a certain amount of money to the Kibera Bible Clubs that we are anticipating comes in from the Memory Quilts. We have no idea. It's a step of faith. Our Memory Quilts have provided an amazing revenue of providing for children in need. When clients pick up their Memory Quilts, they just make a donation for the volunteer hours that have gone in that quilt. We do not ask for a certain amount. We ask 2 things. 1, pray about it, asking God what He'd have you give. And secondly, think about the number of hours. How much would you want to get paid an hour? And then make a donation accordingly. And so that is from the generosity of our clients who have Memory Quilts made, who are now keeping these children alive and providing for these Bible clubs. So no matter what, the Bible clubs are going to get that money. But if we say we committed $10,000 and $17,000 came in from Memory Quilts, we give all of that to the Bible clubs, no matter how much comes in. So in 2015, we had an abundance of more than our commitment. And I had contacted Kenya and said, we have an abundance over and above our commitment, and you will be getting that. Is there anything special, any wish list or any things that you need that you would like to ask for, and see if we can provide that for you? And one of the things they would really like to do is they wanted to start a 6th Bible club. And they broke down the amount needed, and we sent the money so they could start that 6th Bible club. That Bible club is called Samaria, and it began in May of 2016. Now in June of 2016, we had the opportunity to send 2 individuals from our organization to visit Kenya in the Bible clubs. And that was a board member, Jim Paulson, and staff member, Michelle Grable, our operations director. They were able to go. And not only did they get to go see Kibera and see the Bible clubs, but they were able to be there to see Bible Club number 6 open and to be part of that celebration. So we are so grateful for that. We've had many years where we've had an abundance of funds come in over and above our commitment. With that, we've been able to provide tables and chairs that they've never had, spoons, cups and plates that they never had. Now there's Bible for every child. They didn't have that before. They didn't have teaching materials. They didn't have enough cooking pots and stoves. We were able to provide all of that for them, some stationery. And so it's been a wonderful blessing to be able to bless them with what God's provided. As I had mentioned, God had provided space for our long arm quilting machine, but it was on the other side of the building at City on a Hill. Now, our ministry sits on a corner at our location at City on a Hill, and we had another space become available on another hall across from us, and it was quite a large space. It was an organization that was being moved out of state, and Gary Ellens, the director of City on a Hill, came to me and said, "Well, Jill, do you have need for any other space?" And I had said to him, "Is there any way I can move our long arm machine from the other side of the building to be across the hall from us so we could be all together in one space?" And so in September of 2016, we were able to move the long arm machine over across the hall from us, so all of our staff and all of our equipment was in close proximity to each other. In November of 2016, we had another idea to raise awareness and revenue for the ministry, and we decided to have a boutique sale and an open house. And so our volunteers who were working on memory quilts, they also at the same time were working on boutique items that we would sell. People would come and they could buy them for Christmas gifts, help support the ministry, and come and see what we were all about. So we had our first boutique sale in 2016, and that continued through 2019. Now, we have had many, many, many hours of sewing. From 2010 to 2017, we have been sewing on some used sewing machines that I have found on Craigslist or eBay, and they were very basic mechanical machines. They weren't made to handle the amount of work that we were putting out, and we were starting to have trouble with them. They were starting to get worn down. And then remember, we have 15 sewing stations and we need a machine for each one. And to buy sewing machines would be really, really expensive. So without anyone knowing it, I wanted to surprise the volunteers and I wanted to try to raise the money for these machines. So I contacted some organizations, I contacted some donors and said, "This is my idea. This is the machine I think would work really well for us. Would you be interested in helping to provide 15 sewing machines for us?" And so there were 9 donors that came together, provided the money. I ordered these sewing machines, and one morning when the volunteers came in, they came in to Living Threads with brand new Baby Lock Catherine sewing machines with balloons hanging from them. And they were absolutely surprised. They had absolutely no idea. And now they have up-to-date, technologically sound, stable machines with so many more options on them than they had before to even make their work more efficient. And so we were so grateful that God provided through His donors once again for a need that we had. But we were always looking for ways to raise awareness, to raise passion in quilting, maybe gain more volunteers, more Bible Block of the Month students, and how could we do that? Well, we decided to hold a quilt retreat. And so in January of 2018, we held our first quilt retreat at Maranatha Bible and Missionary Conference Center in Muskegon, Michigan. We had around 50 women attend, and we had a wonderful weekend. It went Friday through Sunday. They paid to come. They got excited about Living Threads. They heard the story of Living Threads. They signed up for Bible Block. They paid to come. It was a win-win for all of us. As Living Threads was growing, we were in need of an additional staff, and one staff position that would have been really helpful was to have a partners relation manager, someone to connect with our donors, to take care of our newsletters, our mailings, our prayer letters, all of that, anything to keep connected with our donors. And God provided in April of 2018 a lady by the name of Barb Terpstra. Barb came to us in a really unique way. She worked in the building of City on a Hill and was aware of Living Threads and was very intrigued by our ministry. And so we had a natural connection. And so when that position opened up, it worked out really perfectly for her to step into that. We started to think in the summer of 2018 that we should seriously consider getting a second long arm machine. We weren't able to keep up with just one machine and the amount of quilting that was coming in. So in the summer of 2018, Barb and I started to discuss ways of how could we raise enough money to purchase a second long arm machine, I started searching for them, and I found a used one in Iowa. And there was a man who had that machine who was willing to hold it until we raised the money. Barb ran a campaign called Buy a Mile. We figured out the number of miles from Zeeland, Michigan to Iowa to get that machine, and it came out to $70 per mile. And we asked people if they would want to buy a mile, and we would watch as this little moving truck moved along and was able to get closer and closer to Zeeland, Michigan, until all the money was raised and being able to bring that machine home. In September, all the money was raised, and we were going to be able to get that machine home, but something fell through with the machine in Iowa. And so, due to that, you can imagine we had just raised all this money, did the Buy a Mile campaign, and now it had all fallen through. But God did a miraculous thing. Another machine became available that was even better than the one in Iowa, and it was in Colorado. And so I contacted that dealer in Colorado, and he said, no, I don't usually deliver them to Michigan, but you know what? I just had somebody buy a machine that needs to be taken to Kentucky. Michigan's not that far away. I think I could take both of the machines and I'd be happy to deliver it for you, but at a fee, of course, no problem. So here this machine that fell through in Iowa now became available in Colorado, was a better machine for less money. And we were able to have that one delivered, and it was set up in October of 2018. So now we have both long arm quilting machines in the room across the hall, and we are just raring to go. Now at the end of 2018, we looked at all the donations that came in from the memory quilts, and guess what? Once again, we had an abundance of funds over and above our commitment. And so I contacted Kenya once again and said, you need to get me a wish list because we have quite a bit of money here and we would like to help fulfill some of your wishes and provide for some of your needs. And one of the things on the list was to start another Bible club. So they started Bible Club number 7 called Praise Liberation. Now we have over 600 kids attending these Bible clubs who are hearing the Word of God, who are being fed, and get this, 85% of these children who are attending are accepting Christ. And so heaven is expanding, and these children are taking the message home to mom and dad are wondering, what's happening to my child? And so the gospel is getting out, and we are so excited about that. But another need that we became aware of was many of the children are now aging out of the Bible clubs, and now what do we do with them? So they had this dream of starting an adolescence life skills program. And we had enough funds to give them to start that program. So in April of 2019, the first adolescent life skills program was able to be held. They had 125 teenagers come, and they talked about what does it mean to walk with Christ and to live a godly life, to be sexually pure, to not, how do you deal with boyfriend-girlfriend relationships? How do you deal with those who have been molested? The emotions that go along with that. There were so many drugs. They had drug problem. And it wasn't the kind of drugs we know that you buy on the street. These were things they were finding in the dump, like sniffing paint cans, that kind of thing. But how do we deal with that? So we are very, very excited that that was able to happen, and God provided the funds to meet the needs of those teenagers. Following the opening of the Adolescent Life Skills program in April of 2019, we were able to put together a team to travel to Kenya. The first time we did that, first time we've ever opened it to outsiders other than staff and board. We had a team of 16 people who had signed up to travel to Kenya with us and to learn more about Living Threads and to learn more about the Kibera Slum and Bible clubs. So in June of 2019, we traveled to Kenya, and it was amazing to see what had happened. Children were sponsored. We were able to meet most of the 600 children. We were able to meet and visit each one of the Bible clubs. We were able to worship with them. We were able to build relationships with them. We were able to bring gifts for the children and hold a celebration. And one thing I will never, ever forget was the day where it was over 500 children came to be fed. And I stood at the front of the line, and we were giving them a morning snack of chai and a piece of bread. And my job was to stand there, and I could give each child a piece of bread. And what a privilege to meet each one of them. But it was absolutely heart-wrenching, and I will never forget this. As each child came up one by one, they would do this to me. They'd go, two? They wanted 2 pieces of bread, but I couldn't give them 2. I wanted to give them the whole loaf, but I couldn't. I only could give them 1 piece so everybody could have a piece. But I will never forget that, because all of us know what it's like to have as much bread as we want, but I could only give them 1 piece. Another experience on this trip was seeing the homes that these people live in. They are mud huts. They are about 8 foot by 8 foot. And I had the privilege to be able to go in a couple of these homes. They can have anywhere up to 7, 8 people living in an 8-foot square hut. And one of them I visited had 7 people. It was a lady with 6 children. Not all hers. Some of them she took in because they were orphaned. It was amazing. You were talking about mud floors. You're talking about a curtain hanging halfway where one side they all sleep and one side is their living space. They're sitting on crates and there's 1 light bulb hanging from the ceiling. It's just incredible, incredible. Now these people can hardly have enough money to buy food to feed themselves. They, on the average, get about $1 a day they live off from. But they have to pay for their water, they have to pay for their coal to cook on, they have to pay to go to the bathroom, and they have to pay to take a shower. Now imagine, you have $1 a day, and you have multiple people in your household, and you have to pay 5 cents each to go to the bathroom 1 time. It wouldn't take long with a family of 5 to go through your $1 a day just to go to the bathroom. Now, if you want to take a shower, you are going to pay 10 shillings or 10 cents for a cold shower. But if you want a warm shower, you're going to pay 20, double the money. So you can imagine how difficult this is to buy your drinking water, buy your coal, pay to go to the bathroom, and pay to shower, let alone have money to buy food on top of it. Unbelievable. In December of 2019, because we had the 2 long arm machines in the room across the hall, and we were also trying to fit our bookkeeper and our partner's relation manager in that same room, we needed more space. So another room became available right by us, a small room, but it became an office space for our bookkeeper, Kathy, and our partner's relation manager, Barb, to have their own private office. And we are now up to 2,745 square feet. Now remember, we started out with just over 300 square feet, but God has provided and He has blessed, and He has just grown this ministry in amazing, amazing ways. In January of 2020, we held another quilt retreat, but we did something really unique. We decided, I came up with this idea to start a store of quilting supplies, and we are calling it Gadgets Galore. So I started buying sewing paraphernalia and some unique gadgets and gifts to be able to hold a store so we could have some more revenue coming in and bring people from the outside in, bring outside quilters in wanting to shop our store and raise awareness of our ministry and possibly volunteering or Bible plaque. And so in January of 2020, we opened our Gadgets Galore store at the retreat. It was an absolute huge, huge hit, way better than we ever anticipated. So now our store has been moved into our long arm room, and it continues to serve local quilters. Our long arm quilting department continues to keep busy, and we had 3 ladies who were long arm quilting for us, but it still wasn't enough. We needed to have another 4th person, And God brought to mind a lady who used to be part of our Bible block. Her name is Jenny Mashila. And in February of 2020, we added our 4th long arm quilting staff person, along with Katie Elliott, who started the year before. So now we have these women who are operating our long arm machine, and our quilting services are just amazing, and the quality that comes out is amazing with what they're doing. Now we're March of 2020, and as all of us know, something happened that impacted the entire world, and it's called the coronavirus. And in March, we were told we needed to close our doors, we needed to shelter at home. So in March of 2020, Living Threads closed due to COVID-19 and the coronavirus. But ministry did not stop. Just because coronavirus closed our doors, we did not let that defeat us. We continued to serve, and we made face masks. We made lots of face masks. And 1,030 face masks were brought to me to distribute through Living Threads. They went to nursing homes, and they went to the health clinics. They went to other organizations that needed them. Plus, I mailed out almost 600 of them through the mail to people on our mailing list. And not only did 1,030 go through Living Threads, our volunteers were making them at home, and they were distributing them on their own besides what we were distributing. So we anticipate a couple thousand face masks went out during the closure of COVID-19. But on June 15 of 2020, we were able to reopen our doors. Now, Living Threads looks much different now. I had mentioned earlier we had 15 sewing stations. Because of social distancing, we had to reconfigure our rooms, and we can have no more than 8 to keep everybody 6 feet apart. And our protocols are very different now. There are clear barriers between certain areas where we can't keep 6-foot distance. We also have to wear face masks all day while we're sewing. We have sanitation protocols. We have screening protocols. And our volunteers have been such troopers. They have come each week, and they're coming selflessly to continue to serve, even when it's not always comfortable. But they're there to serve the Lord and to serve His people. So I'm so grateful for their willingness, because without them, Living Threads would cease to exist. In our strategic plan that we had put in place a couple years ago, one of the initiatives we talked about is reaching those who have had a different kind of loss. It would be mothers who have had childbearing losses. It would be losing a child by miscarriage, maybe a stillborn, maybe an abortion. And how do we reach them? And so in that initiative, we decided that pillows would be a great way to make a memory item. So the minute somebody has lost their baby, they can come to us and purchase one of these pillows. They will be pre-made. We can personalize the back, but we can have them ready within a day or two for them, and they can get them immediately to bring comfort and healing to the moms who have lost these babies. So in the summer of 2020, we were able to start making our prototypes. None of them have gone out to be purchased yet, but we have 5 designs that have begun, and these prototypes are beginning so that we can reach out and reach this group of women who are grieving silently and oftentimes privately, because people didn't know their child, but it's no different to them. It's still a tragic loss, and they are hurting. So we look forward to being able to serve this population. I've just taken you through 10 years of ministry of Living Threads. I hope you can see where God has called this ministry into being. He has provided for it in miraculous ways. He has called many, many different people to participate, to be part of His plan. And I'd like to share with you our mission statement. And our mission statement goes like this: to provide memory quilts for grieving families, a purposeful community for our volunteers, and to meet the spiritual and physical needs of impoverished children around the world. So as you can see, God is providing all 3 of those who are grieving, the loss of a loved one. He's providing a place for volunteers to use the gifts that God's given them for His glory. And we're able to provide for impoverished children and help provide the needs that they have both physically and spiritually. And so on September 8th of 2020, we celebrate 10 years of ministry, and we give God all the glory for what He has done.